How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We are live with Colonel Daniel Davis, host of Deep Dive. And, well, Colonel, it's been quite the weekend. Lots of back and forth on the peace talks or not. It's all totally unacceptable to me. And apparently Trump as well. What's your assessment of everything?
Well, I mean, it looks to me like both sides are just digging in further and further away. So there doesn't appear to be any room whatsoever for any kind of negotiated settlement. You have on the U.S. and Israeli side, there's just almost messianic belief that they can and will eventually defeat Iran, that they will fold. In fact, President Trump just moments ago said that, oh yeah, the Iranian leaders, they're going to fold. We're going to probably restart Project Freedom. So yeah, no problem, they're going to fold. Meanwhile, you have from the Iranian side, they're feeling as confident as they have ever felt. And now that I think that they're saying, hey, we can outlast you. They're looking at this oil inventory sheets that are all over social media and all over the other, especially energy news sites that show that the storage facilities in all of them, a lot of part of the world, it's not just the Western world, are depleting, especially in the United States, Asia, and in Europe. And they're saying, hey, within weeks, the West is going to be at critical levels because of the whatever it is, about 12 million barrels per day shortfall coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. So I think that it looks to me like the Iranian side says, yeah, we got all the time on our side. Whatever this blockade that we hate, which is causing problems for us, and the economic from whatever the Besant calls the Operation Epic Economic Fury, whatever. Those are things that are causing real harm. And in fact, there's a lot of reports coming out of Iran over the weekend that they're having economic problems, that they're having unemployment problems, that they're having problem paying people. There's been some shortage of food in some places, medicine, et cetera, all caused by the blockade. So they're hurting. But when they look at the balance here, I think that they have calculated, the Iranian side, that they can suffer a lot longer than the U.S. and the suffering will be manageable. But they see that the Western world, and that primarily means President Trump, and politically as well as diplomatically and militarily, we can't wait that long. And so I think that there is urgency on President Trump's side. There definitely is from a lot of the war hawk community that says we need to just go back in and finish this job. Definitely coming from the Israeli side as well, because they want the war to continue on. They don't want a peace process. Danny Centronovich has talked about that this weekend as well. So there's just every indication that this is not going to get solved diplomatically in the near term. People are moving further away from it. The question is going to be, will President Trump go back to a combat, or will he just try to kick the can down the road and just hope that the blockade eventually causes them to fold, as he said today, before the pain gets too high on our side? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between strategic patience and strategic endurance. And clearly the IGC, the Islamic Republic, have that strategic endurance, right? The government isn't going anywhere. From what I saw, the president, Bezeskian, was meeting with the Mojtaba over the weekend as well. So there's been a continuation of the government just like getting back into the swing of things, right? Where they're operating at a reduced capacity, but they're still functional. Whilst the Trump administration seems very divided over what it wants to do, and Trump's own rhetoric versus action is very inconsistent. What I'm interested in from your thoughts is just they seem keen to restart Project Freedom, but it seems like they discontinued it after what, 48 hours, 36 hours on Wednesday.
36, yeah.
Yeah, and then we saw the escalation over the Emiratis and so on. So if the Trump administration are going to try to sort of reactivate Project Freedom, could we just see them stopping it again, pausing it again? We're just going to see them announcing it, pausing it again, and we're in this renewed merry-go-round of flare-ups?
Well, it really depends on what he means this time by Project Freedom. He said from the Oval Office just moments ago, just before I came on, I saw a video of it, to where he said, well, this will be conducted in coordination with other military actions. He didn't specify what that was at that particular meeting. He said, I've got a meeting right now with my general. So potentially that's what they're figuring out right now while we're talking right now on the air. But if it's not anything military, then the question is, what are you going to accomplish? This guide them through, which doesn't equal a physical convergence where you have warships, accompanying tankers that go out. That's completely unworkable. We don't have anywhere near enough ships to do that. And militarily, that's not going to solve the problem. All you're going to be doing is having a shooting gallery that the Iranian side would be popping off at. If anyone wanted to try and ram the blockade from the Iranian side. So that's not going to work. We don't have the assets for it. Then what are you going to do? Because if you say, well, just guide it, that implies that you're going to tell a civilian ship, hey, go on this course right here. We've got it cleared. It's no problem. And then the Iranian side, they're going to get back on the other radio and say, yeah, you do that, you're going to get hit. And they've been hitting ships here even recently. So they've shown that they're willing to do that. What civilian ship is just going to trust a guide from the U.S. on a radio if it's not accompanied by warships either side? And of course, that won't help either. So I don't see militarily how what this is even going to accomplish. And then if you talk about adding other military measures other than restarting the war, I don't know what that could mean either. So everything depends on what the President Trump implies by restarting Project Freedom.
Yeah, we've got a lot of unknowns here. The UK sending HMS Dragon finally about 2 months after it was supposed to go down there, I think the toilet's been fixed now. There was one issue that I think it was related to a toilet being on.
Sometimes war stops on.
There was no water. There was no water accessible on a ship for the British naval crew. That's the extent of the British Navy. So I think they're going down there. But what do you think that we could see some kind of multinational force? That we could see some kind of the Saudis or some of the other regional players in there. I've heard that Turkey and Egypt are eyeing up potentially sending some kind of assets over there. Do you think that would make a difference?
Look, nobody is going to send warships into the Strait of Hormuz, into the Persian Gulf to escort ships, tankers out, unless there's a deal with the Iranian side. It would be foolhardy for anyone to even try, because then all you're going to do is just get a shooting gallery until you finally start hitting these ships. And again, it's not even the military per se. It's the civilian companies. It's the insurance companies. Are they going to risk going through there to make political hay for Washington and Tel Aviv? I don't think so. I think that they're interested in actually making money, keeping their assets safe. And so they're not going to insure somebody to go through there and hope that the Iranians don't sink it. And especially because Iran has made good recently on hitting them. And all it's going to take is once you, let's just say that all those people you mentioned did send warships and they said, sure, let's go ahead. And then the first one gets hit, whether it's a mine or whether it's a torpedo, because Iran over the weekend also published photographs of one of its submarines having surfaced in the water to say, hey, by the way, we're still here. Or the drones or the speedboats, those were also seen over the weekend. Who is going to say, yeah, we're going to push that, and then you can hit any one of those ships from those assets? And that hasn't even talked about the drones that they can use with these slow moving tankers. It's not like a warship in open seas that can maneuver and move fast. You can't do that with a civilian tanker. So it would be subject even to drones or to short, middle, and long range, maybe not long range missiles, but short and medium range missiles that could be fired from literally all over the country. There are so many ways, Iran. All they've got to do is hit one, and then everybody else is going to say, okay, we're not going to do anything. So I just don't see, no matter what anybody else sends warship-wise, why they would risk their Navy because of that environment I just described. So I doubt it's going to happen. But if it did, I mean, you just have to see, are you going to taunt the IRGC Navy and say, try to hit one? And then if they do, then what? Then what are you going to do? That's the problem with this, setting this thing up. You're going to set up this situation to where if your call is made by the other side, and they said, okay, I dare you to hit my boat, and then they do, then what? What are you going to do? Is that going to restart the war? Or are you just going to stop what you're going to do? Because then you look really weak and feckless. So you have to think about the likely outcomes of this, and I just don't see a lot of that.
No, and I want to get your reaction to another recent development that Trump said. But before that, I just want to go back a week, because that was when we saw the single biggest escalation up until Thursday. And that was what seemed like a miscalculation, right? The Americans were seemingly trying to traverse the strait, and then the Iranians were reacting to that, and then the Iranian media claimed that they had struck an American vessel, and then the IRGC had to walk that back and clarify that they'd simply shot in their direction. What's the likelihood, do you think, that could happen again, and even worse this time? Like there's a miscalculation in this direction and someone hit someone.
Yeah, I think it's probable. I mean, there's no reason why they wouldn't do that again. And I think also a change over this weekend was the IRGC said if you attack, meaning the U.S. or Israel, if you attack any of our vessels again, any of our civilian ships, then we're going to attack U.S. bases and U.S. warships. So a number of officials, not just one, made that threat over the weekend. So based on what they had just said yesterday, it seems to me that they are mentally prepared to go down that path. Now it represents, or it just remains to be seen. Was that just an empty threat? Would they actually do it or not? I don't know what the value is to find out and to see if we're going to do it. But based on this, kind of low level stuff that's been going on over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it seems to me that someone's probably going to attempt it, and we'll find out.
So Trump's also said in the past, half hour, that the ceasefire is on life support. So what was the ceasefire already fragile is now already on life support. It's unbelievably weak. Iran is apparently, I'll just read the whole, I would say the ceasefire is on massive life support, where the doctor walks in and says, sir, your loved one has approximately a 1% chance of living. That's quite a coherent set of sentences for Trump to say, actually. That's quite a deep analogy for him, I think. But so I'm a little bit, I'm not supposed to add my own commentary on that. What do you think of this? Dan, do you think it's does Trump just want the ceasefire to fail so that he can go back to war? I just don't think that either side have the energy for another March level of aerial campaign. I just don't think there's enough assets.
Yeah, there's not. I mean, we have more from reports anyway. We have more physical assets than we did at the start of this thing. But the problem is everyone now knows, because it's common knowledge and on open media all over the place, is that we used a substantial portion of our inventories of the most important assets that we have: the JASSMs, long-range cruise missiles, the Tomahawk cruise missiles, the THAAD interceptors, and the PAC-3 interceptors. All of those saw huge drops in the amount we have left. We have tons of other things that we have, of course, but when you lose that much percentage of those over a short period of time, 40 days, and then you're thinking about redoing it again, and you didn't accomplish any of your strategic objectives. It doesn't matter how many things blew up and how many people we killed. That's almost inconsequential. It only matters, did you accomplish your strategic objectives with that combat power? And the answer is a decisive no. So why do you think you're going to get it in the alleged 25% less that Trump has said a couple of times that we didn't hit the first time, or 30%, whatever number he wants to use at a given time? There's no reason to think you're going to hit it, or that you're going to diminish it, and that you'll have the outcome that you're looking for that you didn't get the first time. And then you're going to have even lower numbers of your inventory. So we don't have the wherewithal with the problem set that we have to overcome, which is geography, which is mountain ranges, the will of the Iranian people, and the massive scope and size of this country. That's all so big, big as, sorry about that, as big as Western Europe. We just
I think your dog agrees. Clearly, they're in agreement with your point.
They got really excited about that. I'm really sorry about that.
No, not at all. No, okay, so I want also to understand. I hosted Matt Retardio yesterday for a conversation, and it got quite animated. I'll say it got absolutely insane. The debate didn't go down very well for Matt, and it was.
I'll have to go back and watch it.
Oh, if you want, it was. I'm going to clip it. He rage quit actually, because I refused to sort of, I don't know, adhere to his demands, which was he wanted me to provide specific. I was challenging him on some points about the relationship of political statements by Hegseth and some of the military assessments by Dan Kane. And I was essentially saying that, he was trying to walk back, or at least clarify. Maybe I didn't frame it well enough, but that made Matt absolutely enraged because he thought I was lying or being intellectually dishonest. Was the word he kept using. He used it 26 times in the space of 5 minutes.
Wow.
Oh, no, it's a great clip. I'll send you if you want to watch it.
Please do. Seriously.
No, I wanted to host him because I like to, like Mario, like yourself, we try to talk to varying perspectives on our.
We do. It is good to have that.
And it's important for intellectual honesty, actually, and diversification. Anyway, the point was that there was a clip from April 16th where Hegseth basically says that a bunch of facilities have been devastated. And then Kane says, it's way too early. It's way too premature to make such assessments as that. which sounds to me like he's trying to clarify that the political absolutism of Hegseth is not accurate to what the military intelligence assessments are. Point I'm emphasizing with all of this is that, to you as someone who's been on the inside, on the battlefield, seeing it, like, what capacity does the American military have to pressure the Iranians more than simply the Strait of Hormuz? Could we see some kind of ground ops in Kharg Island still, or some kind
I mean, I'll just tell you, you can see all kinds of stuff. You can see a resumption. We have the physical capacity to resume the war, just like just picked it right up where we left off. We've gotten all of our inventories restocked. We've got apparently more combat power to launch some of these things, air power and some sea power than we had at the time. But the question is, towards what end? Because like I say, you can go and you can blow up all kinds of stuff on the surface. But what is that going to accomplish? Is that going to make the people collapse? And I had been talking about this since before the war started and ever since. Just all you got to do is just look at just even relatively recent modern history. That the British weren't succumbed during the Battle of Britain in 1940, that the Germans weren't succumbed when we had the firebombing going on, even during the last phase. They never gave up. They continued on. You have Hamas right now, even though you leveled the complete territory, they never gave up. You have Hezbollah. I mean, we just devastated. They assassinated Israel. They had all of their leaders. Nearly the whole top was assassinated last year, devastated on the ground. And now then we're in this another big bombing campaign on the ground, and they still haven't given up. So why does anybody think that one more round here is going to cause a country that's as big as most of Western Europe, with the history that they have and the geography that they have and the ability to fight back that they have, is going to cause them to fold, as President Trump just said? There's no rational basis for it.
Well, he's also just said, I'm seeing here now, that a diplomatic solution remains, quote, very possible. I've had a deal with him 4 or 5 times. I don't know where that's come from. They changed their mind. And he says the leadership is very dishonorable. So it seems like Trump wants a deal. He clearly keeps pushing it, and actually it makes me think of early on Friday, Saturday, he was saying that the progress was looking very positive, right? He sounded upbeat, and then 2 days later, it's totally unacceptable. Is this guy just completely bipolar? Or
he is. I mean, we got to call it what it is, Pyotr. Yes, because you remember back during last year, how many times he said, I thought I had a deal with Vladimir Putin to end the Russia-Ukraine war. I thought we had an agreement. And the Russian sides were going, what are you talking about? What agree? We've never agreed to anything unless you're going to agree to our terms. So when Trump says, I thought we had an agreement, that never existed then, and it definitely doesn't exist now, because the Iranian side has never wavered from their positions, what they're looking for, which is they're going to have control of the strait, that there's going to be reparations, that the U.S. will leave the area, and that they're going to continue to have their long-range weapons, and that no one's going to take their reprocessed material, and they're not going to cut off their support to their regional allies, what we call proxies. They've never changed from that. So to think you had an agreement, and how many times has President Trump just in this war said, yep, they've already agreed to it. The Iranian side has already agreed to it. And they never did. That was always, I don't know if it's just in his mind, if he's saying, if I say it enough, they'll start to believe it. That's pure speculation on my part. What I can tell you confidently is that it was never true, and it isn't true now.
Yeah, and while all of this is going on, we've almost got 2 separate fronts. Well, no, they are 2 separate fronts, but 2 separate things happening simultaneously. US-Iran negotiations and Strait of Hormuz tensions, whilst the Israelis and Lebanon and Hezbollah continue. I just wanted your quick assessment of the situation there. I think it was 39 people were killed in one such exchange over the weekend. Israel's continued to target parts of Lebanon just today. Israeli jets hitting a couple of smaller towns. So what's your assessment on that? And do you think that the Israelis are keeping up this pressure because they ultimately want to push the US back into conflict?
I don't think there's any doubt that that's what they want. You've seen Danny Centrinowitz over the weekend said, yeah, I mean, I think it was on CNN yesterday. He said, yeah, Israel does not want a negotiated settlement. They do not want this to have a deal. They want to go back to war. They want to, quote, win the war. That's just what they want. And this whole issue with Lebanon is really central to all this. It's the linchpin that connects the two, because for Iran, like I said, one of their conditions is it's a total ceasefire and a total end, which they categorize as both Hamas and Hezbollah. So they're saying that, you know, those are part of our allies and everybody has to stop fighting. And of course, Israel seems to be, every time there's any talk about negotiation, they will ramp up their attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so we've seen it here. President Trump, you know, keeps using harsh language publicly, periodically, and Netanyahu keeps ignoring him and doing whatever he wants to in Lebanon. Until those both get solved, I don't see how either one of them gets solved. But that, I think, is the desire on the Israeli side. I think it is incredibly short-sighted and harmful to the Israeli side, and I think they will come to regret it. And there is a schism going on inside Israel where there's a number of people, I'm talking diplomats and senior generals, that also are recognizing this is unsustainable for the state of Israel. We cannot fight everybody indefinitely, which is what they're trying to do. They can't win a war against Iran, especially if we go back to an active phase here and Iran does what it says and starts hitting energy and oil infrastructure and water desalination plants throughout the Middle East, including in Israel, targets they haven't hit yet, but they clearly have the capacity. And if that happens, now it's an existential threat for Israel. And of course, you know, then the threat comes of, well, would they use nuclear weapons at that point? That's speculation, but it's a concern I have.
Do you think that this is part of the Israeli government, and I emphasize that specifically, not the people of Israel? Do you think this is part of a greater Israel ambition?
I mean, it's hard to come to any other conclusion because there's so many people in the government, and it's hard to say whether it's the government or individuals in the government, if those can be disaggregated. But certainly there are many people inside the government, and Netanyahu seems to be one of them, that does have a lot of interest in a greater Israel project, but it's just unattainable. It's pie in the sky. You don't have the wherewithal, much less the morality to go and accomplish that. And they have taken a lot of steps, you know, with both in southern Lebanon and certainly in Syria, and you know, more in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, et cetera. They seem to be trying to go down that path, but it's something you can't sustain. Just like what the U.S. is trying to do with Iran. We've got a lot of combat power there, and it looks great on a spreadsheet and looks great on a paper. And when you have cool pictures of the aircraft carrier and all of its escorts, et cetera, bombs firing and missiles coming out, great video. It doesn't translate into strategic reality, though. You cannot compose it because the other side, the military dynamic, is too big to be conquered by this comparatively small amount of combat power, which you can't sustain. And that's the ultimate failure of this, that you cannot sustain a war of attrition. You just can't do it. Like the Russians can do a war of attrition with the Ukrainians, even if it takes years more, which is apparently infuriating a lot on both sides of that. But they can do that, even if it's not wise. We can't do it, even if it's not wise. We just don't have the resources or the military-industrial complex capacity to do that. We'll run out. We'll literally run out. And the Iranian side will still be there because they know how to endure a lot of struggle and pain. And we just can't. It's just a military problem you can't crack with the resources we have available.
Yeah, one of the things we also touched on with Matt before it went complete chaos was about the stockpiling and intelligence capabilities of the US, Mossad and stuff versus what information isn't released to the public as such. Now, it seems like only a third of Iranian stockpiles have been destroyed, according to CIA / other agencies. Do you think that's accurate? Because Matt was like, no, that's nonsense. It's much more than that. Intelligence takes time to gather, and we're not going to share that kind of information. But why wouldn't we? I don't know. Some of his comments didn't make sense to me. So, like, do you think that we have destroyed more than we are actually letting on?
Who knows? I mean, it's an unknown factor. But what I think we can say with a lot of confidence, number one, and I talked to a few people in the intel community, and they say that number is correct. That's what I'm told. Who knows what the reality is? But when we know the kind of underground facilities that the Iranian side had, and we know that for decades prior, because they foresaw that this day would one day come, they moved their manufacturing underground as well. So it hurts what you hit on the surface because everything wasn't underground, but they have enough underground that they continue to manufacture even during the combat there. So you can't knock that out. It's just too far under mountains, and they have too many of these bases scattered throughout the country. So it's logical and it's rational to believe that something close to that number, whether it's actually a third or 50%, that's we can't say from outside. But whatever the number is, it's a substantial number inside that they still have, and a continuation to perpetuate it, meaning that they can can sustain this for a period of time, especially on the long range drones and even on the missiles themselves. So whatever the number is, it's not static; it's continuing to grow. So that's I think something that we just don't have the capacity to knock out.
So the last question I have for you, and hopefully we can have you back maybe later on in the week to react to the Chinese-US summit, is simply their meeting. The former Qatari PM has said that Israel is using the Iran war to reshape the Middle East, but arguments are that this is all about China, Trump's goals for a greater strategic plan, which I think is horseshit, frankly. But what's your assessment? Do you think, what could we expect from the Trump-Xi meeting in the context of the Iran war?
You know, the Chinese are famous for thinking long term. I mean, they have 5-year plans, 20-year plans. I mean, they're always thinking long term. So I think that this is just a data point for China. I think that they want to continue to try to influence the Trump administration where it can. I think it's reasonable, as Alistair Crook said on my show this morning, that there'll be a lot of pomp and circumstances and a lot of good video coming out of it, but there won't be anything of any real substance. Both sides will say what they think, what they believe, what they hope to see, but that nothing concrete will emerge from it. And I don't think that I don't think anybody's going to challenge anybody one way or the other. So I really think it's going to be a lot of nothing. It's not going to have any impact on the war here. And it's just going to be a next conversation with the U.S. and Chinese relations. So I don't think economically or militarily there's going to be a lot to come out of it.
Oh, interesting, because Trump was brown-nosing Xi by trying to say how good a job he does for the Chinese people and economy, despite, obviously 6 months ago saying how shit it is. So
Right.
clearly Trump has a consistent policy. But Colonel Daniel Davis, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we can have you back. I'm going to stay on, just have a debrief, but I'll let you go on to your next.
Thank you. Look forward to it. Hope we can make it work later this week.
See you soon. Well, that was Colonel Daniel Davis, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, everyone. Good afternoon from London. Just thought I'd stay on. We've got a couple of guests coming up. First time hosting Malcolm Nance, ex-US intelligence, Navy. A great guy who we've been trying so hard to get him on, like almost a month we've been on it. Trying to host Malcolm Nance. He's just been traveling a lot and been hard to pin him down. But he's been on a couple of other guests shows, other people's shows, and we've known each other for a while because of the war in Ukraine. But yeah, looking forward to getting Malcolm on to get into some deeper dives about the state of the Strait of Hormuz and the U.S. military operations down there. What I will do is I'll link the thingy in the chat so you can check it out. It's scheduled for 3.5 hours from now, so 9 my time or 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So obviously be sure to that's the second channel. For those of you not aware, I stream to both channels, my main one and my podcast channel. So be sure to subscribe to both if you haven't already. When the war in Iran slows down or comes to an end, I probably won't be doing as many live streams a day because it's quite a lot. But I think there's so much information coming out and so many different people of interesting backgrounds and perspectives to engage that we're trying to do as much as we can right now. But yeah, and then after that, at around I think 10:30, we've got a diplomatic mediator, Alan Erie. He's been on the show before. He was a key negotiator for the JCPOA. So yeah, we're going to have a military perspective and then a diplomatic one. Alan's been on the show a few times, and I like his candidness for someone who worked on the JCPOA. He's pretty hell-bent on just telling us his opinion without being too politically correct or restrained. It's always a joy to hear his perspectives. But yeah, I just thought, yeah, and check out the comments, guys. You'll find the link in the comments of the chat. But yeah, I just thought I'd take stock again. So many of you emailed me or got in touch after yesterday's complete shitstorm of a debate last night. It was insane. I actually couldn't go to sleep for a couple of hours because it was I was so like my brain was wiring, and even after Larry's chat, I was like, I need to just I need to just zone out for an hour and a bit. So I went to bed quite late. But yeah, I think that was a really interesting conversation around it. And the status now with the peace talks, I just think it's really frustrating that we keep going round and round in circles. Yeah, Froggy. So it's 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US. So depending upon what time zone you're in, I travel a lot, so it's quite difficult finding the right time zone. But yeah, I just think it's very frustrating that we're in this merry-go-round of peace talks. Trump, I don't know if it's a negotiating tactic, if Trump is trying to allude to things being better or worse than they are. A lot of people like to try and claim that it's all about misdirection, that Trump is suggesting one thing and then actually behind the scenes is doing another. As we saw with the operations last year, Midnight Hammer, when they were talking about something might happen, or they're going via Guam, and then they completely bomb them over, using airspace over Europe and stuff. So one has to always wonder whether there is a bit of that to it. But ultimately, I think that we're not really going to be seeing any differences. The main, I think, single issue to consider is whether or not there are more tensions, whether or not the Strait of Hormuz sees continued escalations as we saw last week. It was pretty intense with the Emiratis, and whilst they have, I think, a sizable set of capabilities to deter the Iranians, much more than I think a lot of people expected, I do think that it's not gonna be something that they can last out with as indefinitely. Whether or not the Americans are willing to provide them with arms, replenish their stockpiles is crucial, because obviously there's been concerns about America providing replenishments for European nations, the UK, over the war in Iran, and they haven't done that because they've been wanting to focus on replenishing their own because of the war with Iran. So are they going to do that with the Emiratis? I think it's a pretty big. I'm trying to find someone good to come in and talk about the Emirati perspective, actually, but I think it's quite a big risk. The Emiratis are putting a lot of their eggs in one basket with the US at this point. And it goes to the broader, I think, balance of power shift that I wanted to ask Daniel a little bit about, but he had limited time, which is simply as you've probably, if you're new here, but the premise is that basically you're seeing a new balance of power emerge. You've got different poles, the Israelis being one, the Saudis, the broader Gulf, another. But as part of that, you've got two blocks emerging. So you've got the Turks, the Saudis, the Pakistanis, and one. The Saudis, Pakistanis signed this strategic partnership back in November, which was quite surprising for a lot of people. I did a video on it at the time. It got like 100,000 views because people were like, wait, what's this? But there was a lot of engagement. And at the time, it was seen as quite a big development, but obviously it's even bigger now because of all the subsequent conflict. But on the other side, you've got Israel, UAE, and India. Sort of this it's not an official alliance, so to speak, but you've got these two sort of blocks indirectly emerging, because whatever Pakistan joins, India tries to counterbalance with another, and giving the Iranians and Israelis, well, India joins the Israelis. The Modi government has been very sympathetic to the Israelis, much more than a lot of people ever assumed that they would in history. But because Pakistan's doing that with the Iranians, or sorry, the Saudis, then they're going to counterbalance with the Israelis. Which I just think is quite interesting. Now, there's also talk about Turkey and their unique relationship with it all being part of NATO. The Turkish army is a completely different level to most of the Middle Eastern states. Israel's always an exception. But, if Turkey were to put more emphasis on getting involved in some way in the Middle East, like securing their borders with Lebanon and Syria because of the war with Hezbollah and Israel, that would change, I think, the dynamics quite a lot. But as I think it was Matt, actually surprising, one thing Matt did say, which was worth noting, was that the Turks have done nothing. They haven't made any moves despite incursions by Iranian drones and stuff in the early couple of weeks of the war, in May and March, mid-March, late March, something like that. There were 3 or 4 incursions that were shot down. So there's a lot of movement here. And then, of course, you've got Egypt. Egypt has been relatively on the sidelines, but they obviously have a critical role vis-a-vis Gaza. and a say over the Strait of Hormuz, Suez Canal, which is more important than ever for commerce and maritime access. So there's a lot of moving parts here, which you have to try and keep in the back of your head as you focus on just the bilateral dynamics between the Iranians and Americans. Just a latest bit of news, actually, the Israelis did strike a health center in southern Lebanon. So that's in the city of Tiri, not sure how to pronounce that. Israeli forces carried out a strike in the town of Srifa, targeting a health facility, and there's been at least one death. I'm pretty critical of the Israeli operations, to be honest with you. I have reached out to quite a few Israeli personnel, but not got many responses back, which I think is unfortunate because they don't want, I don't know, maybe they don't want to be interviewed by someone who's more critical. I mean, I try to be balanced, but yeah, it's unfortunate, really. You try to engage people of varying sides, and some people are willing to come on, that's good, but others are reluctant, which I think is a shame or short-sighted. I mean, I try and pride myself in running a professional show here. I mean, it gets out of hand with some people, but I don't think that's a reflection of me as it is the guests themselves. But yeah, that's let me just see here. So there was a bit more from Trump about half an hour ago. He said that the removal of the enriched uranium had been agreed with Iran, but then Iran changed their mind. He said, apparently, quote, you're going to have to take it. We were going to go with them, but they changed their minds because they didn't put it in paper, Trump says. Describing Iranian leaders as, quote, lunatics, Trump reiterates that he has a very, quote, simple plan. The plan is that they cannot have a nuclear weapon. And he says that targeting the Gulf states is a tremendously strategic mistake, which I think is, well, that's because of this choice by the United States to do all this. So, as always, like from my understanding, the collective Gulf states are all very cross with Iran for their decision to target them in specific ways. But frankly, I think a lot of the leadership of the Gulf states ultimately put the blame on America or Trump and the administration for launching this war in the first place, which, you know, whether or not you agree it should have happened, I don't think it was the best way to do it, because nothing's going to change. Ultimately, I can be pretty clear and categorical in saying Iran is not going to be toppled. And that's not because I don't particularly like the Islamic Republic, but because just we can see it. For me, it's not that hard to see the way that things are going. There is not enough political capital and appetite within the United States to do more. And therefore, because they're not willing to do more, not much is going to change. You're not going to see the Islamic Republic collapse in the time frame that is needed before the, I think, political exhaustion in the US is reached. The time frames, I think the Iranians can outlast longer than the Americans can put the pressure on and keep the Strait of Hormuz closed or whatever. I just don't see that happening. At the end of the day, the Islamic Republic government is relatively sheltered from the worst of the impacts relative to the Iranian people. But the Iranian people are so, I guess, what's the word, traumatized by the past couple months, especially the first month of bombing and everything, that frankly they don't want to see the government completely toppled either. Or maybe they do, but there's been a complete shift in a lot of Iranians' feelings in that they don't know whether it's worth it anymore. So I don't think at the end of this day, when the day comes, hopefully when this entire war is largely settled, I don't think much of will have changed. I think that the Iranians may well get away with putting a toll booth on the Strait of Hormuz. The government will still be in place. The Americans will have to accept a certain degree of reality about it. I don't think there's going to be a major upset tomorrow. I don't think that the Iranian government is going to implode, and I don't think the Americans are suddenly going to completely dominate the Strait of Hormuz. It's just too, it's too far-fetched based on how things are going. The momentum, the energy needed to see that kind of thing push through isn't there anymore. You might have felt it in the first month with the intensity of the war, but now it's very slow burning. And frankly, there's not much even to report on, just statements, occasional flare-ups as we saw, but yeah, it's not happening. But anyway, guys, I'm going to land it there. I just thought I'd keep going for another 10 minutes, wrap it up to a nice round 40 minutes. Yeah, be back in about 3.5 hours. So 9 p.m. my time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've sent the links in the chat for Malcolm Nance. We'll be chatting with Malcolm for a good, hopefully, hour or something like that. And then join us again at 10:30, so 5:30 my time, for another chat with Alan Neary, the diplomat who worked in the JCPOA. But we'll see you all soon, guys. Thanks for watching, and yeah, check in then.